Please welcome our friend Nick DeMarco.
I look around and I see a packed house of mostly people I know, which is great, because when you're born in Brooklyn, you make sure that every relative and every friend packs the house so you become popular and an instant success. So thank you for coming. I'll have 10 minutes to give my testimony of 71 years, so I'm going to squeeze it down a little bit. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I was born to wonderful parents. My father was in the service in 1945 when I was born, so I was born in a little hospital in Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn. I think they destroyed the hospital 2 weeks after I was born. And I had a procedure then called circumcision that was added to the GI Bill. So since my father was in the service, he didn't have to pay for that. And my mother tells a story to me that when she gave birth and I was ready to exit the hospital, my father went to pay the bill. And as he went to pay the bill, he saw $25 circumcision charge. And he said, well, I'm in the service. I'm not paying that. And the woman behind the desk says, well, Mr. DeMarco, you're not in uniform. He said, but I'm the sergeant in the military and I'm not supposed to pay that. But Mr. DeMarco, we have rules and regulations. You have to pay that. And they bantered back and forth. And as my mother tells the story, she heard my father say, okay, leave him. And he walked out. So that was the beginning of my life in Brooklyn. We all have a story to tell, every single one of us, because we all have our own DNA that God has put into our hearts and then has come in and said, okay, for your life, you're going to go here. Do we know that at birth? Most of the time not. My father was a first generation here, ice, coal, and oil man before there was central heating, before there was ice machines. His whole village from Italy, and his father's father did the same thing, and he worked 7 days a week and was a great provider. The one thing he wanted in his son's life was for me to have the advantages he didn't have, which was going to college. He was denied that when he was in high school by his dad because he had to work for his father. And that was understood in those days, all right? But that desire was in him, and I didn't know that. I was the oldest boy in the family. My brother was 3 years younger. My brother was a resident genius. I was the failure. He was a better athlete than I, and I was the so-so athlete, but I was the oldest son. So the expectations on me were great. And I felt in my life, even though I had a wonderful childhood, that my mom, who was an immigrant here after 14 years being in Italy, was a very insecure person, so I never got steady love from her because she needed love more than she can give love. So I always had this void in my heart to fill, and that void basically was always there, and I was trying to fill it. And as I grew and struggled through high school and played football, got a scholarship to Temple University, I got the recognition from the world that I brought to my parents, and all of a sudden this hole in my heart was temporarily filled. And I said, wow, achievement in life is where this is all going, so let me go out there and do my best, all right? College, married my high school sweetheart, nice Jewish girl from Brooklyn, going out with her after 5 years, graduated college, got married at the same time in 1969. The Vietnam War was going on. I was an ROTC officer, went into the service during Vietnam, had our orders cut to go to Vietnam, just got married, and 2 weeks before we were due to be shipped over to Vietnam, my officer class, which was small of 32, all of a sudden was called because Brezhnev had moved all tanks against the Berlin Wall, and there was no tanks to back up our tanks in Germany. So all our orders were rescinded, 32 officers, and we had priority one Germany. And that was like a miracle. Two of my friends were sent to Vietnam. Both were killed in the first 2 weeks. So it was a difficult time and a time of turmoil. After the service, I all of a sudden, I have my first child, Dawn, who was born in Texas. We moved to, I got a job, as you know, in those days, in 1969, the top 5 corporate 500 companies, the presidents all started, basically 73% of them started in sales. So it was encouraging to me because I think that's my road. So I started in sales in the Midwest and went for a watch company, and then one thing led to another. Got promoted, started a fashion watch company, met a couple of the designers, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, through the fashion editor of Playboy magazine, I was suggested to this big company that had this new brand called Pierre Cardin. You got to hire Nick. And this man said, okay. He hired me. I became executive vice president of the largest division of Cardin, which was the suit division. And everyone at that time either owned a Cardin suit or wanted to own a Cardin suit because it changed and revolutionized men's fashion. Okay, here I am, and I'm skyrocketing. And I'm looking at my marriage going, I never knew what love was. I got married at 21. This wonderful girl, even though I'm a wonderful dad in my own mind, is not fitting the bill to where I'm going. And I got divorced. First one in my family, which was taboo at that time. Wonderful girl. And I left her. Not my children, but her. And that's how desperate I was to fill this void in my heart. Met Cardin personally a couple of times. Flew out with him to do this little show in California that Regis Philbin started called LA Live. Went on the show to talk about fall fashions, and Mr. Cardin said, why don't you come on the show with me and be my commentator along with me? And I did. After the show, he came up to me and said, Nick, would you like to be my United States coordinator to take care of all my business in America? I need someone young like you, and to control my licensees at the time. I said, Mr. Cardin, I'm young. I'm 31 years old. They're not going to listen to me. Oh, no. They will listen to you because we have contracts with all of them. And I couldn't believe it. My life changed. I went from here to here, in control of a business that was doing at that time about 180 million, and with 26 companies producing licensee products. And when they first saw me, they go, look at this young kid. Oh, we're going to have fun with him. And they didn't have any fun with me at all. So we were one of the first companies to turn the licensing business into really solid revenue. With that, all of this stuff and this hole in my heart was getting filled with all of the worldly things. Studio 54. Being the president of Pierre Cardin, knowing all of the companies out there, especially Barney's, which was the best store in the world, and this person who was in control of Barney's, who was just one of these off-the-wall, independent, good-looking, how do I say, the owner of the Sun, Gene Pressman, obnoxious, self-confident individual, and I became real good friends. And for the first time in my life, he introduced me to many things that I regret. Number one, cocaine. Number two, at that same night, introducing me to this new place that had just opened up called Studio 54, where there was big crowds outside, and all of a sudden they parted our ways when we walked in, and I never had to wait in line. They always made a path for me, not only because of my position, because of who I knew. So all of a sudden I was living in Manhattan, and I had a cadre of any woman I wanted, basically. We used to look through the model books and select, oh, how about that one? Yeah, her nose is a little too, and how about that one? Well, that's how bad it was. And we would go out, have a great time. I still had 2 kids, was a really wonderful father, so I had 2 worlds of being a great father and going into this world that I had no knowledge about, but enjoying it because it filled this void. Fast forward, November 26th, 1985. Married a girl, second wife, who was perfect to fill the void in my heart, but was a very damaged young lady, one of the big models in New York, and married her against everyone's opinion because she filled this image, and the marriage started to collapse, which we knew was going to happen. So here I was in my bedroom on 56th Street, and now everything in the world that I really thought I needed to fill the void was there. I had 2 homes. I had a house in the Hamptons. I had a nice apartment in New York. I had one of the first turbo Porsches from Germany that I imported. I had a 4-wheel drive vehicle. I had all the money that I wanted in the world, and I was empty. I'm in my bed at 11 o'clock at night, and I look up. I was a good Catholic. I went to church on Sunday, which was kind of a challenge for my friends who were non-religious, especially my Jewish friends. But they respected me for that. And I looked up and I said, God, if you're really real, I need you. Show me, please. And I did it with a sincere heart. I remember then that there was a Bible that someone gave us for my second marriage. So I reached under the bed, pulled out this brand new box with the wrapper still around the Bible, opened it up, and I thought, wow, okay, I'll just open it up and pointed. And I opened up to Matthew 7:7. Seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open, ask and it will be given to you. And I read it sincerely. No bells or whistles went off. Put the book away, put it back in the box, put it back under my bed, went to sleep. The next morning I get a call from a woman who was the only born-again woman that I ever knew in my life, who was one of the best hair and makeup artists in New York, Maria Makeda. She goes, Nick, why don't you come to church with me on Sunday? I'm a Catholic. A church is 35 minutes or 40 minutes. It's in a building that everyone recognizes, and you're out of there. And I said, okay, sure. I'm a Brooklyn boy. I'll do anything. I just ask God to show me, right? She said, no, we belong to a church that's in a sound studio on 41st Street. It starts at 10:30. It's a non-denominational church, and I think you'll enjoy it. And I'm going, okay, I'll go. I want to make sure it started at 10:30. I got there around 11, thinking that maybe, I can cut the service off maybe in 10 minutes. And I go into this building, and all of a sudden, I hear the sound coming from the sound studio behind this lead door, because it's a sound studio, right? And I'm going, this is not the typical church that I'm used to. And I open the door, and I see about 300 young people, models, actors, raising their hands and praising God. And I'm going, this is not my Catholicism. So I begin to close the door and try to get out of the situation. And the girl sees me, Nick, and she grabs me and puts me right in the front row. And I'm listening to the service after 3 hours. She is, the pastor is about 4'11". She's black. She can't see out of one eye. She can't hear out of one ear. And she's delivering the service that everyone is responding to. And I get a whisper that she has the power of deliverance. I had no idea what that meant. All I know is that after a short 3 hours, I'm there and I really feel good about this. I feel good about it. There's something here that these people have that I want. It's just, it drew me, all right? After that, she had a call. She says, everyone who needs prayer, come on up. And I see her big deacons, big black guys, they're over there, and they're putting little towels behind all these people that went up for prayer. And as she's praying over them and not touching them, they're falling. And they're catching them and putting them on this I said, this is definitely not my Catholic church. And I'm white-knuckled to the chair right now saying, I'm not going up there, right? Finally, at the end of everything, she looks at me, she goes, there's some people here that prayed for God to come in their life, and they need to come up and ask him again. And I said, okay, I'm a Brooklyn boy. Played football, had a JD card at the age of 13. I'm not falling. I'll go up there, but I'm not falling. I raised my hand sincerely again. There were about 9 of us there. She started at the very end. I closed my eyes and I said, Lord, if you're real, show me. I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. The girl that brought me there went nuts. Oh my God, Nick DeMarco. Oh yeah. Nothing really, I felt good, but nothing really changed. The pastor comes back and whispers in my ear. She goes, it's not going to happen now, but it's going to happen soon. So I didn't know what you meant. I said, okay. 2 weeks go by. It's January the 6th, 1986. The same woman who brought me there said, Nick, we belong to a group called Models for Christ. They're a group of models that believe in the Lord, read the Bible, and are trying to change the direction of this fallen society, especially the models. But we have no place to meet. And I said, why don't you meet at the Cardin office? We have beautiful offices on 57th Street, because I know Cardin did that in Paris to a big group of born-agains, because the head of the born-again group in Paris was also the leading fashion writer for La Figaro. So there was ulterior motives for his doing that. And I said, but send someone over to tell me what this is all about, because I don't want to be peeling people off a wall and in my office. She goes, okay, we're going to send someone over to you at 4 o'clock on that same day. 10 to 4 on that day. Office is busy. We have glass walls in my office, my PR company, my controller, my secretary. I get a call. And I get a call from a friend of my now estranged second wife who was suicidal. And I didn't see for 2 weeks, and I thought maybe she killed herself. And the friend calls me and says, Nick, I just want to tell you that she didn't kill herself, but she's with another man and went away over the Christmas holidays. Emotional pain is very, very, very difficult to control. It's impossible. And this emotional pain, here I am sitting there with tremendous pain in my heart, betrayed, hurt, not knowing what to feel. And then all of a sudden, I begin to feel a warmth go through my legs, up through my stomach, out of my head, and all of a sudden I see myself sitting at my desk, and I feel like someone just wrapped their arms around me and held me, and I didn't know what was going on. I felt total peace. And I'm in the middle of this experience, and the elevator door opens, and my 4 o'clock appointment walks in. And it's the representative from Models for Christ. He gets ushered into my office. I'm not saying anything to him. He sits down, and he begins to talk to me about Models for Christ. Didn't take more than about 4 minutes. He stops what he's talking about. He looks me in the face, and he says, the Holy Spirit just came in your life. And I'm going, well, how do you know that? He said, I've seen that look before. So I just went, woof. Tell me about it. He said, look, can we go back to your apartment? I said, yeah. We went back to my apartment, and he said, do you have a Bible here? And I said, yes, under my bed in a box. I gave him the box. He gets the Bible, and he opens it to Matthew 7:7. And the words just poured out in my life with just tremendous meaning. Abnormally born, on that day, I became a Christian. On that day, all my friends from Studio 54 and all the models knew that Nick DeMarco was a born-again Christian, but they thought it would pass. It didn't. It didn't. I felt so great about myself, you know? Here I was now a Christian. I was president of Pierre Cardin. I made money. I can create so many things for the Lord now. Lord, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do that for you. And the Lord said to himself, now is your time of training. Became a Christian. My greatest desire is to get married again to a good Christian wife, right? But I'm not choosing my wife. Anyway, in the short of it, got on a blind date with my current wife of 28 years, Annie. She wasn't a born-again Christian. She was a Danish Lutheran, all right, about to go back to Denmark because she gave up on men in New York. We got together on a blind date. I kept on praying, Lord, take her out of my life. She doesn't seem to be a born-again Christian. Lord said, don't talk to her about God. Just be who you are in God. A month later, she got saved and accepted the Lord, got filled with the Spirit. We got married 4 months later, and we're going, Lord, you operated this really quickly. You know? Why? Married 7 months rather, and on May 12th, 1989, my life went into the desert. And God, I know, was with me. And I'll just tell you this one story because I'm running out of time. We get a call at about 3:30. My wonderful daughter was just finishing up her first year at the University of Colorado. She asked her mother and I, and we were very friendly, her mother and I, very friendly. To this day, we're the best of friends. Said, do you mind if I take a drive back as opposed to fly back? I have this young man who's been dating me, and we knew the young man, we met him. And he would like me to meet his parents because this young man wanted to marry my daughter. She wasn't quite there. But we're going to drive back to Michigan, and then I'll fly back home. I reluctantly said, okay, because, you know, as long as you're not driving, and even though you're a good driver, she said no. Her mother said the same thing begrudgingly. And apparently on a straight highway in Nebraska, she was given the wheel of the car, and she lost control of the car because the car was top-heavy from the packing that this young man did to, you know, from his dorm. And they both got thrown out of the car. The car flipped over. They both got thrown in on 995 in the grassy knoll. The young man, as he tells it, felt his toe and his foot, and he realized there was something wrong with that, but he went immediately over to my daughter, who was lying down, little blood coming out of her head, her mouth, but she said, I'm fine. He didn't know that internally all her organs were ripped from her, internally from the impact of the... We get a call, and we were in our home in Warwick, New York. We rushed to LaGuardia Airport. I called my secretary. She made the necessary 3 planes to get to North Platte, Nebraska. But before I got on the plane, I decided to call the hospital at LaGuardia. And as I called the hospital and spoke to the nurse who was crying, she said, Mrs. DeMarco, there's no need of coming. She passed. You know, the shock always comes first in grief. You don't know how to react. I put the phone down. I walked with my wife into the parking lot of LaGuardia, and I screamed, why, Lord? Why? A primal scream. Why, Lord? And the audible voice came in. Nick, did you not pray to me to protect your daughter? Did you not pray to me to keep her safe? I said, yes, Lord. And I knew what he was saying. I knew what he was saying. That the only safety in our lives are with him and our final destination of heaven. And she was there. She had accepted the Lord at the same Pentecostal church about a year before, sincerely doing that. And I knew what he meant. Then his next question to me was, do you want her back? And I said, no. That began my road to discovering where she was, what this heaven was all about, what we're exhorted to be, what our goal in life is. And I began to realize that none of us really know, or really, for the most part, care to know where we're going. And I delved into this. The Lord led me into this. Through all the trials and tribulations, lost the job right after that, and from 1990 to 92, no work. Then got involved with venture capital people, got involved with Nomura Securities out of Japan. We tried to buy a couple of companies. We bought Nautilus, the equipment company, became a partner in that. From that, I got into Halston, became a president of Halston. I really worked for the banks to try to turn the company around because it was really losing a lot of money. And my job was to sell it, which I did. And then right after leaving that job, I got a call from a friend of mine that says, Nick, why don't you work for us now, become our operations chief? We're going to buy companies. We have a fund, and we're come on doing this. And I said, sure, okay, where are your offices? Well, we just moved to the 76th floor of Tower 1 of the World Trade Center. Great. This was May of 2001. I went to the office every day at 8 o'clock. Anyway, not to make sure I'm on time over here. September 11th. I'm on my way to 8 o'clock to get into that 76th floor elevator where my staff is. All right? Everyone thinks I'm going there. And on the way there, I realized that there was a meeting that we had scheduled, which was a prayer meeting that we had scheduled in May with 5 executives. And we had planned on meeting on this date called September 11th. So I said, okay, I'll go there first, and then I'll head down to the World Trade Center. So at 8 o'clock or 7:30, we met with our group, 5 of us. 2 of them were Merrill Lynch executives, so they worked on Wall Street. And about 8:35, 8:30, 8:25, something like, we left to go down to the Fulton Street stop. And as we're going down on the train, the conductor said that, there's a bomb scare on Fulton Street. You have to get off at Wall. No problem, because it's not that far away on the 4 line. And we did. We got up at Wall, walked up the top of the stairs, and all of a sudden, I see all these people, and then this big boom, and the second plane just hit the second tower. I'm looking up, stuff's falling down, people are going into, you see these half-dressed firemen in civilian cars driving to the towers to try to get into it. The cops have everyone on the street not thinking that the buildings are going to collapse. And then all the stuff is falling down, all this greasy yellow stuff, which was part building, part human remains. And I said, oh my God, it was surreal. And I realized they think I'm in the floor, and I didn't know where the first plane hit. So I tried to call my wife on the cell phone. Cell towers were down. Nothing happened. I said, I got to get out of here. I can't help anyone. I just got to tell my family that I'm still alive. The thought was, okay, go back down to the train station, go back down to the 4 train, and miraculously, there was a 4 train there, packed. I got on the 4 train. It started going back uptown. All of a sudden, the lights went out, and the train derailed. And the conductor said, grab the hand of the person next to you. And this little woman, this black woman with her son, grabbed our hands, and we walked at the end of the car on the rails into the train station, which was City Hall, exited the train station, and as I looked back at the World Trade Center, both towers were gone. I see this man near a hamburger stand or a hot dog stand And he's looking at me gazed. He was totally covered in white. His suit had almost a pyramid of white on each shoulder. I went up to him. I said, "Are you all right?" And he looked at me and goes, and then the smoke and the debris started to come. I turned around, started walking north to Grand Central. Finally got there about 2 hours later, got the opportunity to wait online for a payphone, picked up the phone, and first called my wife. No answer. Called my son who lived on 10th Street in Manhattan. He picks up the phone and starts crying. "You're alive, you're alive." His mom, my first wife, is there with him. I said, "I'm walking up to your apartment, but do me a favor, try to call Annie." My partner had went over to our house. My partner at that time was in the business, lived in New Canaan. He knew I was dead because he knew I was on this. And the plane that hit the 78th floor, we lost 5 people that day. And as I reflect back on that experience, I know that God had other plans for me. But the journey that we all have is the journey of how God uses us and what our goal in life is. You know, most of us here are successful people in our fields, all right? But the one thing we have to understand that God's success and worldly success are 2 different things. And our goal, and we all have goals because we all plan them, right? If we're good business people, we all have a business plan. But his business plan is one thing: to be with him. Where? In heaven. And what is heaven all about? None of us really have a clue. We have these aspirations of floating in space, and the Bible is chock full of heaven. My whole goal in life has been to tell people about that, to get them to understand, Christians, where we're going. We're all intelligent people. Do we not know where we're going? Is the grave the end? No. It's the beginning. No, I normally start off this conversation by saying, how many men believe in heaven? And everyone raises their hands. And then I say, well, how many want to die to get there? And they all lower their hands. Do we have a choice about that? No. We have a choice about understanding where we're going. And as Billy Graham said the other day in a read, he said, once a man understands where he's going in heaven, then he can live his life meaningful. That's my story. Heaven is real. And the road we're on is a road to heaven. And for those of us who don't know about that, research that. Research it in your heart and in your mind. And the one assured thing that all of us can understand, that the key to heaven is Jesus Christ. Thank you.